Hey everyone, so let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered where your energy actually comes from when you're running in PE or physical education, thinking hard during a test, or even just lying on the couch? Okay, who here ate breakfast today? If you have eaten your breakfast today, it's so nice. Now, did you know part of that food you ate is being turned into energy right now by these tiny structures inside your cells called mitochondria? Today, we're going to take a closer look at these little energy machines. They're small, but trust me, they're doing big work. Let's meet the real MVPs inside your cells, the mitochondria. So, what are mitochondria exactly? They're organelles, which means they're tiny structures inside your cells. Think of them as mini factories or power plants. Mitochondria, or in singular form mitochondrion, are small, double membrane organelles found in almost every cell in your body. Their main job is to produce ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, the energy your cells need to function. Mitochondria have their own DNA. This is different from your cell's nuclear DNA. What this means, most of your DNA is stored in the nucleus of your cells, but mitochondria have their own small loop of DNA called mitochondrial DNA. This DNA lets mitochondria make some of their own proteins. They don't rely completely on the cell's nucleus for instructions. Some cool fact, you inherit your mitochondrial DNA only from your mother. So your mitochondria are basically a little family heirloom passed down from your mom, your grandma, and so on. Why it's special? Not many organelles can make their own proteins. This makes mitochondria somewhat semi-independent inside your cells. Another fact is that mitochondria break down glucose and oxygen to make ATP. Mitochondria are in charge of taking glucose from the food you eat and oxygen from the air you breathe and turning them into ATP, the energy molecule of your cells. So how they do it? Through a process called cellular respiration, especially during the final step, the electron transport chain, where the most ATP is produced. Mitochondria is also often called the powerhouse of the cell. Since mitochondria are the main source of ATP, they're basically powering every activity in your body from blinking to breathing. Imagine each of your cells is a tiny city. The mitochondria are the power plants that keep the lights on and machines running. When you're running, jumping, or even just walking to class, your mitochondria are working overtime to give your muscles the energy they need. And lastly, mitochondria have a double membrane, an outer membrane and a folded inner membrane. Here's what it looks like on the inside. The outer membrane is like the security fence. This is the smooth outer layer. It protects the mitochondria and controls what enters and lives. Number two is the inner membrane. The inner membrane is folded up. We call those folds cristae, which is number four. That's where most of the energy making magic happens. The inner membrane is where the electron transport chain happens. These folds matter because more folds is equal to more surface area, which means more surface to make ATP. It's like packing more machines into factory. Number three is the matrix. Inside the inner membrane is the matrix, a jelly-like space where the Krebs cycle happens, another important step in energy production. So for a quick analogy, think of a mitochondrion like a power plant. The outer wall is the fence, the cristae are where the energy is made, and the matrix is the control room. Okay, now let's talk energy. In biology, energy is the ability to do work, but your body doesn't run on gas or electricity. It runs on a molecule called ATP or adenosine triphosphate. ATP has three parts. One is the adenine, which is a nitrogen base. You can see that in this picture, which is color green. The ribose sugar, which is the color red, pentagon color red, and three phosphate groups, the three blue circles in the picture. This is where the energy is stored. When the last phosphate group breaks off, the energy is released and the ATP becomes ADP or adenosine diphosphate. Think of ATP like a rechargeable battery or even money. Your cells use ATP to pay for everything they do, from moving muscles to sending signals in your brain. It also do building new cells, repairing cell parts, and pumping ions in and out of the cell. So how do we make ATP? That's where mitochondria come in. They take glucose from the food you eat and oxygen from the air you breathe and turn them into ATP through a process called cellular respiration. Here's the basic formula. Glucose plus oxygen will yield carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. Now, why is oxygen important? Oxygen is the final electron acceptor in the electron transport chain, which is the last step of cellular respiration. During cellular respiration, electrons are released from glucose. These electrons move through a series of proteins in the mitochondria called the electron transport chain. At the end of the chain, oxygen comes in and accepts the electrons. They combine with protons, or H+, to form water, or H2O. Why is it important? Because first, it keeps the electron transport chain running. Without oxygen, the chain stops and ATP production shuts down. Most of the cell's ATP or energy is made in this step, so no oxygen is equal to very little energy. This is why we breathe oxygen. So it is absolutely necessary for making that ATP. Mitochondria are like electric generators. Food is the fuel. Oxygen helps it burn cleanly to make electricity, or in our case, ATP. So how does cellular respiration actually work? It happens in three main steps. The first is glycolysis. This happens outside the mitochondria in the cytoplasm. It breaks glucose into smaller pieces. Second one is the Krebs cycle. This happens in the matrix of the mitochondria. It breaks things down even more and releases electrons. And lastly, electron transport chain, or ETC. This happens along the inner membrane or cristae. It uses those electrons to make the most ATP. Zoom in on the electron transport chain, or ETC. This is where the big energy payoff happens. Most of your ATP is made here. Electrons move through proteins in the inner membrane, and that movement helps pump protons across the membrane, creating a gradient, kind of like pressure building up behind the dam. Then just like water spinning a turbine, that pressure spins an enzyme called ATP synthase, and boom, ATP is made. It's like a hydroelectric dam inside your cells, using stored energy to spin a machine and make power. Now imagine if your mitochondria weren't working. You'd be exhausted all the time because your cells wouldn't be able to make enough ATP. Some rare diseases like mitochondrial myopathy happen when mitochondria can't do their job properly. People with this condition often experience muscle weakness and fatigue. Let's bring this back to you. Athletes, for example, have tons of mitochondria in their muscle cells. That's what gives them energy to keep going. Also, your brain uses a ton of energy, so it's absolutely loaded with mitochondria. Even when you're just thinking, you're burning ATP. What do you think happens if your cells don't get enough oxygen? How do you feel when you hold your breath too long or run out of breath? All right, let's do a quick recap before we wrap up. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. They use food and oxygen to make ATP. Cellular respiration has three steps: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and etc. And ATP is the energy your body uses for everything. So next time you're running in PE or physical education, staying up late studying, or even just breathing, take a moment to appreciate your mitochondria. They're the tiny powerhouses keeping you going, one molecule of ATP at a time. Thank you for listening. You did all well. See you in the next module. Bye bye.